Hey everyone, and welcome back to the OurMFC channel. If you're watching on YouTube or the podcast, we are joined with a very special guest this week, Phil Spencer. How's it going, Phil?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. How are things with you?
Yeah, really good, thanks, mate. I know we've been chatting before this, just before we jumped on here, talking a bit about the Killers and the Riverside and things like that. So really good as well, thanks, mate. Um, So we're going to talk today a little bit about kind of your background, give people a bit of an insight into what you do, how you got to where you are now, and then get on to your awesome new book that you've just released, Everyone Around My House for Parmo. I mean, who doesn't love a book that's got the word Parmo in it?
That's a unique selling point right there,
It
isn't it?
is right there, isn't it? You've captured every person from Middlesbrough's heart with that one title. Um, so yeah, we'll just jump straight into it. So, what was your childhood and like growing up? What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of my childhood and stuff, so we moved around a little bit in my early sort of years, and then we moved to Teesside probably when I was about 4 years old. So we kind of moved. We lived in Yarm when I was growing up, and it was just very much. I wasn't really that into football when I was really young, and then I moved to Yarm, and everyone supported Middlesbrough. It was quite strange because I didn't really know too much about them, and I moved to
Yeah,
the area, and it was. I think by the time that I properly got into football, it was kind of the perfect time to start supporting Middlesbrough because that's when Janino was there and Ravanelli was there, and I must have been about 7 at the time, something like
yeah,
that. So it was kind of like the ideal like preparation for supporting a football club because I mean, no disrespect to other players who've played for the club, but they can't really compare to the likes of Janino and Ravanelli, can they? So when you've got
no,
him turning out at your local club, it's pretty hard not to kind of fall in love with football and Middlesbrough as a team. So that was kind of my upbringing. I was always from that point on, I was kind of like mad about football. I was always playing football in the streets and on the local fields and that sort of thing. But it was probably it was the first season that I cover in the book that I got my season ticket, the 2003-2004 season. I'd been bugging my parents up until that point to try and get us a season ticket, and they kind of gave in at that point. And it was pretty much the perfect time to get the season ticket because as we all know, it was kind of the start of a very exciting journey. And being a young, naive football supporter, I was like, oh, this is what it's always like, isn't it? Cup finals and European adventures and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a good time to get involved.
yeah. No, like you say, I don't think many players can compare to them few seasons starting out. So, like you say, it genuinely was the perfect time. I mean, I know I wasn't around then. I was minus, so that's how far
Oh,
back
making
I'm
me feel
going.
old.
I know, yeah, I do it to everyone. I do it to
Nah,
everyone.
it's all right.
So where was it that you actually moved from to Yarm?
I was born in Leeds, so that's where I've got a bit of my accent from. I
Yeah.
lived there until I was, oh God, maybe like 1 or 2, and then we lived in Leicester. We moved
All
around a
right.
little bit with my dad's job, and then we settled in Yarm, and it was Yarm and Teesside where I grew up and spent all of my childhood before moving on to university and stuff at the age of 18.
Yeah. So then, well, obviously when you've moved to Yarm, and like you say, you were growing up kind of in a peak time to be a Middlesbrough supporter. What was it that kind of really encouraged you to support Middlesbrough? Was it your friends or your parents? What was the influence to that?
It was just kind of being surrounded by it, really. That makes it sound like it was kind of peer pressure. It wasn't kind of like that, but it was. You kind of move to the area and you make friends with people who live on your street or kind of live nearby, or people who you go to school with, and everyone was just obsessed with Middlesbrough. So you'd be out playing football, and everyone had the red Middlesbrough shirt on, then everyone would turn around and they'd have Juninho number 10 on the back of the shirt. So even though I wasn't going to the matches and I wasn't that big a fan to start off with, but you're kind of going, right, okay, Juninho's the player that I need to, he's the one that I need to like appreciate, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing them on TV, and obviously around that kind of time there was cup finals and that sort of thing. And you just kind of like gradually start soaking it up, and you kind of realize how big a deal the football club were to the whole area, really, whether it was my friends or like my neighbours who I mentioned in the book, who they had season tickets, and we used to go with them occasionally to like reserve team matches and that sort of thing at the time. So all of that was just kind of I suppose just kind of like simmering away in terms of like building up my my kind of love for the club. And then ultimately, when I did get my season ticket, it was kind of like delayed gratification, really, because I was kind of like I was ready to get in there and enjoy it and experience kind of seeing the first team like every week, because it was something I hadn't really done up until that point.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I think you were spot on in the sense of, you were, you'd moved up here, but you were fully kind of engulfed with it, weren't you? You were consumed everywhere you looked. It was there. It was kind of in your face. So I guess, like you say, not necessarily peer pressure, but it probably just felt right at the time to kind of like embrace everyone else kind of being involved with the club, and you kind of finding your liking to football. I mean, in terms of your parents, were they interested in football? Did they support a team or?
Not really, no. I think my dad kind of half supported Leeds when he was growing up, but not massively. Neither of them were really that into football. It was only really in those kind of years when we got the season ticket, because I convinced them to get one, and then it was kind of at that time where I went, and my mum and my dad both went as well, and they kind of shared a season ticket. And I mentioned in the book as well about how, to kind of make it appealing for them, we kind of did like a sort of like draft pick sort of thing to see which match they'd kind of go to. So you'd kind of be like looking down the list of the teams that were in the Premier League, and both of them would be like, oh, well, I want to go and see Man United, I want to go and see Arsenal, I want to go and see Chelsea. And then it was all exciting. And then you get to the point where it's like, I don't know, you got like Wigan and teams like that at the bottom. It was like, oh God, you can go to that one, it's fine, sort of thing. But I was just lapping it up, and I was just excited to have someone to take me at that age. And it was an exciting time.
Yeah, I know you do mention that in the book quite early on, how at times your parents have got to kind of draw the short straw as to who goes to the the cold Tuesday nights when you're playing a little bit of a, no disrespect, but worse team. So I get that. It's quite a funny story to tell, isn't it, when you look back on things. And then, so obviously, as you've grew up, you've kind of embraced supporting the club, and then you get to an age where you're starting to get a job, starting to work. Kind of, what was your journey from starting work to how you are today, writing for TalkSport?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was. I guess it was a bit of a strange one, because I went to Sunderland University, and I studied media production. So it was kind of focusing on radio and that sort of thing. And that was something that I really enjoyed doing. But I think it was the kind of course, and it was the kind of industry where, probably quite similar to what it's like nowadays, you needed so much kind of extra work experience to have any chance of cracking the industry and getting any kind of job in it. And I don't think I really threw myself into the course as much as I should have done at the time, really, in hindsight. So it kind of got to the end of university. I didn't have a huge amount of work experience, and it was one of those situations where it was like, right, well, I can go out and try and get this work experience, but it'll probably mean moving back in with my parents. So kind of like moving away from my friends who I'd been living with for a few years. I had a girlfriend at the time. I was kind of like seeing her up in Sunderland. So it's all these sorts of things where you're kind of thinking like, oh God, I don't really want to have to move back in with my parents to kind of do this. So it almost became easier to get like, I suppose like what you'd call a proper job sort of thing. So I started working in I was working in a call centre in Newcastle at first. And then, it just kind of ended up kind of like continuing on that path and doing like various roles in sales and that sort of thing. So I ended up working as a recruitment consultant for a few years in London. And I did these kind of jobs until I was, I'm 32 now, so I was doing those kind of jobs until I was about 26. But it was just
Right.
for me, it was soul destroying, and it was the sort of
Yeah.
thing where you were earning decent money and that kind of thing, but I just wasn't into it whatsoever. It just kind of wasn't me. And then that's kind of when I made the decision to kind of like redirect myself and kind of go back into an area that I was passionate about, which was writing about football and that sort of thing. So yeah, kind of retrained in 2016, and then yeah, I've kind of like worked for a few different places in the last few years, and kind of like yeah, kind of on the right track now, I guess, doing something that I really enjoy, which is great.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that, you know, it took you till like 26 before you know, kind of made that jump, and you obviously decided to redirect yourself in this different path, and go down something that you were really passionate about. Because it leads on to my next question, which was, you know, if someone that was looking to go into sports journalism, how, like, what would your advice be to someone that's starting out, someone that's kind of new to the industry?
Um, I think it would probably be just kind of throw yourself into it, and kind of don't turn your nose up at any sort of like opportunity. I think when I was at university, it certainly wasn't like arrogance or anything like that, but it was probably more insecurity than anything. It was kind of like I was quite comfortable with like my group of friends, and I didn't really want to like
Yeah,
put myself out there by getting rejected for saying, "Oh, can I come and do work experience with you?" and that sort of thing. So it was a lot easier to kind of stay in my comfort zone, sort of thing. But then
yeah,
what ended up happening was, as I mentioned, I didn't kind of get the work experience that I sort of needed to maybe pursue that as a career option. And I think it just kind of gets to a point where I don't know. I don't really know what I was expecting to happen during those years when I was working in sales, but you kind of realize that nothing's, I'm going to sound really like preachy here, but like nothing kind of gets handed to you at that point.
yeah,
So it was kind of, it
yeah,
got to a point where I was like, oh, well, this just isn't happening. So I'm going to have to go out there and kind of like change things and change the way that I operate in order to kind of like go down that sort of path. So yeah, I think the main thing is just kind of get as much experience as you possibly can, and yeah, kind of don't be too proud to kind of like put yourself out there and ask for work experience. And although places might not be able to take you on and stuff, someone will give you that kind of opportunity. And even if an opportunity doesn't seem on the surface of it like it's going to be a huge benefit to you, there will be some kind of experience that you'll be able to take from that and take into the next thing, and that might get you work experience at a slightly higher profile place, and you can kind of like start building from there, really. But ultimately, you've got to make the decision to start somewhere and start building from that point.
yeah. I think I'm just gonna move out of this light because it's right in my eyes.
Need your sunglasses on
I
soon.
know I need my sunnies on. It's never this sunny. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I remember when we interviewed Craig from the Gazette, and he said the same. He said, you know, when you're in a position where if it's something that you're a little bit unsure of, or you're thinking it's a bit of a risk, you've got to get out of your comfort zone, don't you, and kind of take every opportunity that kind of comes your way. And I think it's, you know, if it's something that you are genuinely passionate about, you've got to see it, don't you, as less of a risk and more of a, you know, what would I rather do? Kind of sit in this job and be happy and comfortable just on this pay, but kind of not getting what you really want from a job role. To just
I
going
think
for
that's the
it
thing
and
though as well.
trying it.
It's not even something that's kind of changes as you sort of go on. Like even if you become quite like established in the industry, it's kind of like a skill set that is quite handy to have, because you're always kind of reaching out for interviews and you're trying to speak to different people, to whether it's breaking a transfer line or to just do an interview on a story that you're writing, and you're going to get a lot of no's along the way. You're going to get a lot of people that
Yeah,
don't want to speak to you for whatever reason. So it's almost just kind of getting to that place where it doesn't matter if someone says no to you, and that's literally it. That's the worst that's going to happen. They'll say no. It's like, sorry, not interested, kind of thing, and then
yeah,
that's it. And you can kind of move on. And it's just, maybe it's just kind of like having that kind of security to to kind of like be able to take that no and just be like, well, I haven't lost anything. Let's just move on to
yeah,
the next thing. So
yeah. Yeah, like building up a little bit of resilience almost. But I mean, it's like us on here on OurMFC. Like I could have never have imagined starting this up that I'd be interviewing the likes of you and Craig and even Andy Campbell, and kind of getting these interviews and having these opportunities. But like you say, that stems from kind of putting in the work and taking every opportunity that comes. And you can say it's a little bit of a risk, but like you said, just being passionate and kind of enjoying what you do as well. That's
Yeah,
probably
definitely.
goes hand in hand. But yeah, moving on to your book then, seeing as though we've kind of summarised kind of your journey and how you've got here. Moving on to Everyone Round My House for a Parmo. What was your key kind of inspiration for the book? How did it come about?
Um, this is going to sound really corny and I don't really mean it to, but I feel like it was always something that I kind of wanted to do. And I realize that sounds really corny, but I'll explain why.
Sounds cornier out loud.
It was my dream. No, it wasn't really. It was, yeah, it was something where, because they were kind of the first years that I had my season ticket, I think they're just their memories, and obviously it's because of the heights that we sort of reached in that 3-year period in terms of reaching the Carling Cup final and getting into Europe and doing all of that sort of thing. But I think because they were the first few years that I had my season ticket, like the memories of that era just kind of, they're so like vivid in my mind, sort of thing. I kind of I automatically remember the matches, even the most mundane ones during that period. I remember them so much more than I remember any match that I've been to in the time since, because ultimately over time they just kind of all end up blending into one. But it was just a time period where I have such fond memories because I had that personal excitement of going to those matches. But obviously, because it was the most successful time in Middlesbrough's history, it was a time that everyone sort of looks back on fondly. And although at the time I remember going to the matches, and I know a lot of people, you kind of grow accustomed to the sort of standard that you reach. So you're playing in the UEFA Cup 2 seasons in a row, and it's like, oh well, we're Middlesbrough. That's where we should be. Like
Yeah,
we should be beating this team in
yeah.
the
The
group
standard's set
stage. And
now.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what happens. People very quickly get accustomed to that new standard that you reach. And obviously, in the years since, we've realised that that was the exception rather than the rule, because since then we've either spent a couple of years in the Premier League or we've been battling away in the Championship. And I think just over the years that have gone since then, it's just a time period that I think Middlesbrough fans almost like needed to be reminded of such a wonderful time to kind of like support the club, because although we've had success and stuff since, it's been a bit of a slog, hasn't it? In the
Yeah,
Championship, it gets a little bit
100%.
difficult to not to support them, but to kind of like remain as enthusiastic and be excited about going to a match on a Saturday when when you're playing Luton Town 3 o'clock on
Yeah,
a Saturday kind of thing.
yeah,
And it was just something that I wanted to do. It kind of coincided with lockdown and stuff as well. I had a bit more time on my hands like everyone else did. And it just kind of seemed like the ideal time to sort of throw myself into it. And yeah, it was a really, if nothing else, even if the book tanks and no one buys it and all that sort of thing, it was just a really enjoyable thing to like throw myself into during that time, and getting to speak to people who were involved in the club during that time period. I just personally found it fascinating, and yeah, I just kind of wanted to share that with everyone, really.
yeah. I think that goes hand in hand with what you said a little bit earlier about kind of enjoying what you do, and having something that it doesn't matter what happens. You really enjoyed doing it. It was a bit of a learning experience for you, and you got to like interview all these different people, and just kind of immerse yourself in something that you've never done before, but
Mm-hmm.
something that you're really passionate about also. So like hand in hand, I completely understand kind of your reasoning for wanting to do it and kind of to push the boat out a little bit and test the waters. And I think it's brilliant. And well, I think I speak for many people. I think we're all glad that you did it, because I think for me personally, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I wasn't old enough to fully remember the best times really of the club's history. So to be able to kind of relive that through your book and, what people have said, through your interviews, with plenty of different players, plenty of different writers that were around then as well. To be able to kind of relive that moment and kind of see it in a different light and kind of play it in your head. So obviously we've all watched it back and, seen it, but kind of watching it then and then seeing it from so many different perspectives, like throughout the book, to go hand in hand, just it pairs it all beautifully. So yeah, no, we really thank you for that. What was your favorite part about making the book? 'Cause obviously, it took, making a book. It's not just you write it in a few weeks and then bang it's published. It's a long process. So from deciding, right, I'm going to go for it. This is, I'm going to do this. What from then until it being published? What would you say was your favorite bit and your most nervous part about doing it all?
I think my favourite part was probably near the start, kind of like speaking to people and kind of like the sort of like research sort of phase, because it's the first book that I've ever written. So I kind of went in there with no sort of template for how I should do it or any kind of, I'm sure like you'd speak to authors who have written like 10 books, 20 books or whatever. And they're the kind of people who they're like, right, this is how I do it. I'm going to spend this long doing this amount of research and I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. And I
Very
just
intricate.
know I was just blagging it really. It's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So basically after having gone down a YouTube rabbit hole of looking at various highlights and that sort of thing, it was just kind of like getting in touch with people that I know or people that I know of sort of thing who were around at the time, like in the club and covering the club and that sort of thing. And so just kind of speaking to them, and I had my memories of it, but they were as a young supporter. So you're kind of like looking at everything through rose-tinted glasses and you're not in the press conferences, and I don't really remember the sort of the ins and outs of the stories and what was going on at the time alongside what was happening on the pitch. So I think just being able to speak to people who remember more of it in more detail was just a really fascinating thing for me, because I think now as well in my role as a journalist, I kind of know to an extent how like the football world kind of operates a little bit more in terms of like media access and all that sort of thing. Obviously at the time I had no clue whatsoever. So being able to speak to people who, for example, were speaking to Steve McLaren in his press conferences and trying to build a relationship with him and dealing with the media team at the club who were trying to manage Steve McLaren as well. Things like that just really appealed to me and were just kind of really interesting to sort of get stuck into. So I think when I didn't have much of a plan in terms of how the book was going to be structured or anything like that, that was just a really good period of time just to kind of like throw myself into it and almost just kind of see what comes up. Like I didn't really know what story, everyone knows the story in terms of what happened on the pitch, and everyone knows about the Carling Cup final, and everyone knows about Basel and Steaua Bucharest and going to Eindhoven and those sorts of things. But it was more about kind of like trying to find out what else was going on behind the scenes, stuff that people maybe don't know about. Was there any hardships that were happening? What players were, people focus on how good the team was and it got better year on year and year. But it's almost like remembering that for that to happen, some players will have had to have been left out or sold when they perhaps felt that they had something to offer. So there was kind of two sides of the coin there. And yeah, I think just being able to speak to people and kind of like learn a little bit more about that and then shape the book around the information that I sort of learned was really, really exciting, really. And to answer the other part about the stuff that I kind of found hardest, it's probably quite a boring sort of part, but I think when you get to the end of the process and you're approaching the deadline for kind of like sending off like the full text of the book, it was all written and everything like that. But it was proofreading it and doing stuff like that, which was just not because I feel like there was a huge amount that needed changing, but it's the kind of thing where you're just going to go over it and over it and over it. And like, even though it was like, all right, it needs to get sent off in like 4 days. It was like, I'm just going to go through it one more time just to see if I can find one
Yeah,
more spelling
yeah,
mistake or something that I've done wrong. And I went through it numerous times, and my wife, she went through it as well, and like proofread it and everything. But it's just that sort of thing where when the date comes to submit the book, you're almost kind of put out your misery a little bit, because otherwise I would have, if they just said, have another 6 months to look at it, I
yeah.
would have just kept reading it and reading it and reading it,
Just
thinking there's got to be
endless.
something that I've missed. And it's just, maybe that's my own like insecurity and that sort of thing. But yeah, just that's quite, yeah, quite draining sort of thing. So it's quite good once it's gone, it's sent off, and yeah, it's someone else's job to look at it from that point on.
Yeah, it's kind of off your shoulders a bit. But I think that comes with also, like you said, it's been, your first ever book. Who's to say that you're not going to go on and write so many more? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, that probably comes with, like I said, it's your first time kind of doing it and being in that experience. But touching on that first thing you said about, what you enjoyed most about the book, I think the way that you've kind of wrapped it all up, because obviously, when you were talking about the book, like you said, these are your memories tied in with, bits from people that were there, part of the media team, coaching staff, that kind of thing. So pairing the two has really, really worked, and like you say, kind of really encapsulated that them moments, because there's a lot of, as much as I think I know football, or maybe you do, or people that I know think they know football, and we've got this idea. You don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, do you? So to kind of get that insight into, yeah, you know what, it was our most successful period as a football club, but why? Why was it that our most successful? What was it that? Why was Steve McLaren the way that he was? What made him tick? All these things. You've kind of addressed, and like I said, through whether that be player interviews. I know Frank Quadru, he features quite often, and he talks about the changing room and the importance of that. But then the media team talking about the importance of McLaren being a real kind of perfectionist, and not just on tactics, but like in the media as well. So yeah, pairing them two. Yeah, you've done a brilliant job. And
I think
that's kind of,
I was just going to say, I think that's kind of like, that was part of what I sort of enjoyed about it, because I think when, obviously, like in the last few years, kind of working in the industry, and like you speak to players and that sort of thing, and you kind of, as an adult, you realize that they're just other adults who are doing a job, and albeit they're very privileged and everything like that. But every adult has their own insecurities and their own motivations and all that kind of thing. And that as an adult.
yeah,
But obviously it was a time period when I was watching that period as a kid. So it was quite strange, because I was interviewing these people and trying to like find out as much information as I could. And you kind of like find yourself reversing back to being a kid, going like, Frank Drew, what was he like, sort of thing? Like Mark Viduka,
yeah,
what was he like? And you kind of find
yeah,
yourself reversing. And
yeah,
maybe that was kind of what made it kind of exciting to kind of do, because I don't know, you kind of like recapture that sort of enthusiasm that you kind of had, because at the time they're like your heroes and that sort of thing. They're
yeah,
the
of
people that you're
course.
looking forward to seeing on a Saturday, and people are kind of doing like unthinkable things for your club. So you do kind of throw yourself into it, and yeah, it was just an exciting, and yeah, just really just a really kind of fun thing to like throw myself into. And although the book kind of takes a while to sort of write, I can honestly say that at no point did I get bored with it or think about putting it away, sort of thing, just because, I don't know, there was always the next game to kind of focus on, or you'd be going like, oh, right, okay, well, I've got the Carling Cup finals, the next bit that I'm going to be writing. It's like, right,
Yeah,
okay, that means I get to like delve into this a
yeah,
little bit more. So there was always kind of something to kind of keep me interested as well, which was a big plus, really.
yeah. Like you said, and then after obviously the Carling Cup, then you've got Europe. So like you said, there was always something, especially when you knew what it was that you were going to be writing about. Writing about the best part of our history. You're never really going to get bored of that, are you? I mean,
Yeah,
you could
no,
relive
exactly.
that thousands of times. But that kind of rounds up kind of what we were discussing about the book. Obviously, we can get this on Pitch Publishing, um, and can you get it on Amazon as well?
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah,
You can get it through the Pitch Publishing website, or you can get it on Amazon, WH Smith, Waterstones, and a few other places as well. But yeah.
Yeah, so like I say, if you're watching on YouTube, this is the front cover of it. Make sure, like you say, you go and check it out because it's well worth a read. I haven't finished it yet. I'm nearly there. Please don't hate me. But yeah, it's definitely well worth a read. And like we mentioned earlier, it's got Parmo in it, so it's a no-brainer.
Not to like.
Exactly. And if you listen
Sorted
on,
out like a free Parmo with every copy or something, shouldn't I? That would have been. Oh, that would have been.
You've missed
That
a
was
trick
a PR
there.
blunder. Never mind.
Link up with Central Park or something.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Oh,
Oh,
that would
I'd have
have
been a
been
millionaire by the end of this.
oh
But
God, yeah. The amount of you'd have to buy like shares. You'd have to like trademark Parmo and
yeah.
like yeah, and just go wild with it on there. But
Missed the
yeah, and
trick there. Never
you
mind.
did, certainly did. But yeah, if you listen on the podcast as well, like I said, we've let you know there where you can find the book. So do go and check that out and give it a read. Last bit from you then, Phil. Thoughts on next season? Chris Wilder, just get you that in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of the end of this season, it was probably, I think it was probably about right that we ended up missing out on the playoffs. Yeah, I think in terms of when you look at the way that we started last season and the way that we kind of were in, I suppose, in the latter days under Neil Warnock, there was a lot of questions to be kind of asked about the squad and whether they actually had what it took to challenge for promotion. And I know that there was a few signings brought in January and a lot of players kind of stepped up to the mark, which was great. But I still think that we just kind of weren't quite good enough to get in the top six, which obviously proved in terms of the table. But I think going into the summer, I'm quite optimistic in terms of what's going to happen next season. Everything's sort of in place. You've got Chris Wilder in place. You've got Kieran Scott, who's in place. So there's kind of like a bit more strategy to the recruitment, which I can't even remember the last time there's been a kind of like notable recruitment strategy. So I'm intrigued to see how that works out because in theory that should be a good thing. And yeah, I think it just seems quite a clear focus going into next year. Really, they seem to know what they're looking for this summer. It's quite clear who's going to be leaving the club. So hopefully there's not going to be any late surprises or anything like that. Everything seems quite strategic and quite thought out, which is a novelty for a Middlesbrough fan, really. So yeah. So I think going into next season, assuming that everything kind of goes to plan this summer and they get the players that they sort of want, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be in the top six next season. Top two is always going to be difficult in terms of the quality of club that are coming down from the Premier League, and Norwich and Watford are inevitably going to get promoted again next year, aren't they? Because they do it every second season. But yeah, if we can squeeze into the playoffs next season, I think that'll be a good season. And yeah, I think never rule out a Chris Wilder side over a couple of legs in the playoffs. So yeah, we'll just see what happens next season. But I'm optimistic probably for the first time in a few years. So that's exciting.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, like you say, since his appointment, he's been fantastic. Considering Warnock said there wasn't much left to get out of them players, and he managed to get us right until the end. The last game of the season was pretty unbelievable, really. And then, like you say, going into this summer, there's been such a heavy focus. As soon as that last game finished, it was right. Bang, straight on to next season. This is the plan. This is what we're going to be doing. There might be a few shock outgoings, but we're doing it for the right reasons. There's that kind of trust, isn't there? There's that belief. So yeah, I'm certainly with you, and I think you get yourself a striker and a goalkeeper a striker that can get you 15 goals a season, a little bit above or below, give or take, with midfield contributions, and then a goalkeeper. You're looking at a really strong side. As long as we can get the depth right. But yeah, I'm with you on that one. Top six, 100%.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, eh? But no, it's been an absolute pleasure, Phil, and I really appreciate you taking some time out today to speak to us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It really has. Thank you very much, mate.